part 4, rebuilding the forks on your Buell 1125 CR and R models. In this stage, I'm going to show you how to reassemble and torque down all the front end parts on your Buell. To begin, take one of the fork legs and slide it right into place. On the right leg, you'll want to make sure there's a tape strip which is on the outer tube like such. You'll want to make sure the brake hose is right up against it. That way during normal riding, as the brake hose goes up and down and shifts around, it doesn't shave a hole in it. After the fork is in its proper location, you can go ahead and begin to finger tighten the fork pinch bolts, 3 on each side. These take a 7/32 Allen key or socket. After the pinch bolts are in place, you'll want to go ahead and move on to the snap ring, which is located directly underneath the upper triple tree. There's a notch inside the fork. Make sure it seats properly in its place. Once you get the snap ring fully seated into place, you can then go ahead and further tighten the 3 fork pinch bolts. Do not tighten them down completely because you will need to torque them down once the bike is on the ground and under its own weight. Now, it may take some time to tighten these pinch bolts down. With the fairing pod on the side, you don't have much room to work with. Once you complete one of the fork legs, go ahead and move on to the opposite side. You'll go through with the exact same process, finger tightening the 3 fork pinch bolts along with the snap ring, making sure to not torque them again up until the bike is on its own weight. The only difference is obviously the caliper is not on the left side, so you do not have to worry about a brake hose chafing. Once the forks are set into place, go ahead and grab your front wheel. At this stage, you'll want to check the bearings, make sure they're in good shape, and also check the rotor, make sure there's not excessive wear on it, because now would be the time to replace it. Along with checking your wheel bearings and your rotor for excessive wear, you'll also want to check your brake pads before reinstallation. Before you lift the wheel up and put the axle in, make sure you set the left side pads into place. Now when I say left side, that's with the rider on the bike. Only put the left-hand side pads into place. The right pads will have to wait till the wheel and the axle are in place. It may take a few tries to get the pads seated into their hardware in the caliper, and then the caliper into the rotor. Now once the caliper is where it needs to be, go ahead and grab your axle and lift the wheel up into place. And before you slide the axle into place, make sure you take a dab of anti-seize and put it on the threads to help in future disassembly. As I mentioned in part 2 of the disassembly, the axle is a left-handed thread. So when you tighten, you will need to be going counterclockwise. The tool I'm using to tighten the axle is the original 22mm socket that comes with the Buell tool bag when you purchase the bike. Like I mentioned in part 2, if you do not have this specific tool, you can get any lug nut that's 22mm outside diameter by roughly 1.5 inches to stick into place with a crescent wrench. Once the axle is in place, you can go ahead and move on to finger tightening the 2 lower leg pinch bolts. These take a 7/32 Allen key or an Allen socket. Next step, you'll want to take the 2 5/16 Allen key or Allen socket caliper mounting bolts and finger tighten them into place. The reason you want to just have them finger tightened into place, that way when you go ahead and put in the 2 right side pads, you have a little wiggle room to play with. Once you get the 2 right pad sets into place, you can go ahead and push in the 2 brake pad pins. The pins take a 3/16 Allen key or an Allen socket. Once the pads are put into place and the pins are also in place, you can go ahead and final tighten the mounting bolts for the caliper. The caliper mounting bolts again take a 5/16 Allen key or an Allen socket. They get torqued down to 35 to 37 foot-pounds. After the mounting bolts are torqued down into place, you can go ahead and move on to the brake pad pins. These again take a 3/16 Allen key or an Allen socket, and the pins get torqued down to only 11 to 15 foot-pounds. If your socket gets stuck in a place like mine did, just grab a set of pliers and wiggle it out. Once your axle is torqued down to 39 to 41 foot-pounds of torque, you can go ahead and move on to the lower leg pinch bolts. These take the 7/32 Allen key or Allen socket and get torqued down to 20 to 22 foot-pounds of torque. After those are torqued down, Go ahead and remove the front stand. That way you can get the bike back on its own weight to finish up and torque down the 6 remaining fork pinch bolts. As shown here, there's going to be one on the left side top triple tree and one on the right. And then there's going to be 2 on the left side lower triple tree and 2 on the right side. These take a 7/32 Allen key or an Allen socket, and they also get torqued down to 20 to 22 foot-pounds. Here you can see the top bolt I just torqued down, and then the 2 remaining on the left lower leg here. They can really be a pain to access. Same exact deal on the right side. Now with the reassembly nearing completion, you can go ahead and grab your front fender for reinstallation. Go ahead and reinstall the 2 T30 Torx bits on the left side and the 2 T30 Torx bits on the right side. Now these 4 bolts are the only bolts in the reassembly process that will get torqued in an inch-pound spec. The book calls they get torqued to 74 to 82 inch-pounds. In my case, I decided against torquing them to this because I do have a one-piece carbon fiber fender and did not want to break it. I was satisfied with just snugging them down lightly with the ratchet. Now that your front 4 fender bolts are snugged down, go ahead and make sure your kickstand's down before you remove the rear stand. The final step in the process is to pump your front brake lever to make sure the pistons in the caliper fully seat back up with the pads. You have now successfully completed the reinstallation process on your Buell 1125 CR or R model after a fork seal rebuild kit. Now go ahead and enjoy your bike.